This is Lecture 61B that will accompany Chapter 64 when it comes out next year, Volume 3, on Oceania in the ABCs of Communism, Bolshevism 2018. And our subject today is the advanced Theocratic Chiefdoms in Melanesia. Now, there are 11 million people in New Guinea today, and human occupation of this tropical island began at least 60,000 years ago. Now, currently, nearly 1,000 different tribal groups and almost as many separate languages make New Guinea the most linguistically diverse area in the world. And on that island, Papuans are the majority of the peoples. They are directly descended from the earliest population of New Guinea, and socio-cultural evolution took these people through the advanced Paleolithic of broad-spectrum wild resource exploiters to agricultural revolution, and from tribal agriculture to the chiefdom stages. By the time of European arrival, some had become members of advanced theocratic chiefdoms, and among these, some had become early class-divided, state-organized kingdoms. Now, remnants of all these sociocultural evolutionary stages still inhabit the world's largest tropical island, and large areas of New Guinea are yet to be explored by scientists and anthropologists, and there are uncontacted tribal groups living as they have all along. So, taking the province of Enga in Papua New Guinea, or the PNG, as we have abbreviated it for these lectures. By the way, there is a series, an Australian television series on Netflix that's available called The Straits, which shows a small 60-mile strait ocean water area between the northern peninsula of Australia and the Papua New Guinea. And you'll see that the term PNG is widely used there for that particular province, or for that particular country. Anyway, it has 5 districts, and it's located in the northernmost region of the islands of the PNG. The people of Enga are called Engans, and they have about 500,000 members. That makes them the majority ethnic group. They speak one language in all 5 of its districts. A small minority of Engans live on the eastern side of the region and remain in the western highlands, and their territory is accessible by road from Mount Hagen and by bush planes landing on airstrips or water, which is where all the drug trafficking, of course, takes place between Australia and the PNG, which is the subject of that series called The Straits. As we saw in the last lecture, Enga has its 2 most important interaction zones extending into the highlands from the shores of Sepik Ramu Inland Sea. The Lay Valley, that's the Lay River, L-A-I, was the western extension of the Sepik Ramu Wagi zone, and the lower Lay Gap was the highlands link with the Sepik Terry zone. Now, just briefly on the origin myths. Enga origin myths for the tribes mirror the Sepik Ramu Wagi and Sepik Terry division. First of all, the tribes of the eastern Enga describe a feast on the slopes of Mount Gilue, where an ancestor named Maragomoye brought together people from all corners of the world and distributed food at daybreak. After the distribution, people set off for surrounding regions, including Mendi, Ialabu, and Mount Hagen. A man named Kamal Maeta and his sister traveled to the west and founded the tribes of the Cowgill Valley, the Tambul, and the Saka Valley of eastern Enga. That's the origin myth for that part of the country. The second one is for the western Enga myth, which is the story of incest and cannibalism, and it tells of triggering the dispersal of the 4 sons of Hela. They founded the Papuan Plateau groups called the Duguba, the Duna, the Huli, and the Western Enga. Within the Wagi and its associated valleys, there are artifact clusters, proving a number of population centers. The populations living in the Lay River valleys were the most western center of the Sepik Ramu Wagi zone. Access from the inland sea to this particular center would have been by the way of the Arafundi River, Cassowary River tributary. Other clusters are found on the tributaries of the Uat, the Maramuni, and the Leh rivers. The eastern Wagi were linked with the inland sea through the Schrader Mountain Range and the Jimi Valley, Jimi. The Terry Basin, that's Tari, was the main focus for the other interaction zone. It would have been accessed from the shores of the inland sea by way of Cassowary and Cassowary river valleys and the highland valley of the lower Legip. Forest clearance in this basin seems to lag behind the Wagi Valley and occurred about 5000 BP. Distance is proportional to variation in the transfer of ideas within the two zones. The distance between the coast and the large agricultural valleys was greater for the Sepik-Terry zone than was the case with the Sepik-Ramu-Wagi zone. Stylistic features on stone mortars, pesils, and figures, that is, statues, indicate that there was some trans-highland contact between these zones through the southern foothills. In addition to being alignments to the north coast, both the Sepik-Ramu-Wagi and the Sepik-Terry zones were part of major social networks that extended north-south across New Guinea. These north-south linkages continued after the formation of the Sepik-Ramu floodplain. The north-south trade axis that extended north from the Terry Basin to the lower Legip and south to the Papuan Plateau was the most important trade alignment for the Terry. The Sepik component of this trade to the Terry ATC declined after 1905 when European settlers instigated the conflict between the Iatmul ATC and the Chambri ATC. Settlers introduced metal weaponry to ATCs in the middle Sepik River, their idea being that war would end the trade come political alignment of the north coast to other parts of New Guinea. Today's Sepik River peoples have little in common with their prehistoric ATC form, and this entire part of New Guinea was important in the ethnological fieldwork of Margaret Mead and her husband Gregory Bateson. However, as with all of Mead and her Boasian school of anthropology is concerned, it takes a trained eye to see through the anti-Marxist bias. Another important north-south trade axis extended from the middle Sepik through the western Wagi to the Torres Strait that I was just mentioning. Pearl shell gathered in Torres Strait reached the Sepik by means of this route. Now, back in 1932, Margaret Mead observed pearl shell crescents being traded down the Uat River. These trade goods had come from the Wagi Valley, having taken the route from the south coast upriver to the Papuan Plateau and onto the foothills west and south of the Gilue and Ialibu Mountains. Mendi to Ialibu. From these foothills, traders went to the Cowgill and Nebelyer valleys and thence to the Wagi Valley. The pearl shell crescents that Mead observed in the middle Sepik in 1932 would have traveled by that route. A year later, Europeans were flying pearl shells into the Mount Hagen area because by 1933, European traders found that the people in the Hagen area wanted as much as they could supply. Before 1933, partnerships of big men in the Mount Hagen area had been between natives and aligned along a north-south axis. Certainly the men of the lower Nebelyer, with their contacts with Cowgill and Ialibu, had control over the flow of pearl shells into Hagen. This north-south trade axis has a long history, as pearl shell fragments have been found in deposits dating to 3000 to 2000 BP in the Rita Mauda rock shelter in the Uat Gorge. And today, it's this north-south trade axis which provides the basis upon which the trafficking of cocaine and heroin from other parts of Asia to Australia occurs, because there are so many places to land planes on these various airstrips on that north-south trade axis. Anyway, if you're interested, you can watch that show. By way of contrast with the Wagi pearl shells were not common in most parts of Enga province and the Terry Basin in 1938. Bill Adamson observed on a survey made that year that the hull seemed to have little shell, the huli seemed to have little shell but wanted it. Radiocarbon dates published in 2010 by Richard Gillespie show the western New Guinea Papuan habitation began about between 48,000 and 42,000 years ago. Research indicates that the highlands were an early and independent center of agriculture and show that agriculture developed gradually over several thousands of years and that the banana had been cultivated in the region since at least 7,000 years ago. Now, geography accounts for different subsistence patterns in the Lay River, Lower Lay Gap River, and the Angan High Country. Ethnography describes the pre-sweet potato sedentary horticultural life of the people living at an altitude of 5,000 to 6,000 feet in the valleys of the Lay River. They cultivated taro, yams, and other crops on the flat river terraces, while their pigs foraged on the mid-valley slopes. Simultaneously, they hunted and gathered a broad spectrum of wild foods in the high forest. Horticulturists also resided above 6,000 feet in the Ambum Valley of the Upper Lay River, where the high country was rich in game, and above 6,500 feet there were mobile hunter-gatherer groups that did plant some taro. Before the introduction of the sweet potato, the horticulturists living in the lower Lay Gap River Valley prevented famine by supplementing their diet with sago starch and Pangium edule they got from other groups on the upper Cassowary River, living at 3,750 to 4,725 feet. The Nete people, N-E-T-E, obtained their sago from stands located above 800 meters in altitude. That's about 2,500 feet. One Nete clan in the 1960s had rights to a section of the Yafe-Bayele Sago Swamp, 10 square acres in size, located at an altitude of 1,900 feet in Gadio territory. The sago flower was carried upslope after being compressed into balls, each weighing up to 65 pounds. Chiefdom elders bossed the pre-sweet potato cults of the Lay River agriculturalists. Their ritual involved feasting with the ancestors to elicit their cooperation and goodwill. In the lower Lay Gap Valley, cults were in the hands of shamans, whose specialized knowledge allowed them to perform spells and healing. Catholic-style rituals were performed for the dead for money. Of course, these rituals were permeated with mystery, fear, and goals of appeasement to stupefy and con the rubes. Groups living in high-altitude areas practiced initiation ceremonies, inducting young men into ritual life, alternatively, wherever the scammers claimed a pre-sweet potato history as hunter-gatherers. Artifact finds from Enga and associated parts of the highlands are evidence for links with the shore of the former inland sea. Now, there are artifact links east along the north coast to West New Britain and other parts of the New Guinea mainland. Now, taking a look at the features of the stone figure statues. The nature of stone mortars, pezels, and stone figure statues shows differences in ritual practice in the Lay River, Lower Lay Gap River, and the high-altitude areas of Enga by 5,500 years ago. There are marked differences between the stone figures, elaborate mortars and pezels from the Sepik Terry zone and the Sepik Ramu Wagi zone. Varied agricultural practices between the lower Lay Gap and Lay valleys account for some of them. Access to these areas from the shores of the former Sepik Ramu Inland Sea was by rivers. The distance between the shores of the former Sepik Ramu Inland Sea and the large population at Terry was one thing different from the agriculturalists in the Wagi and Lay valleys, as was trade with the Wagi and other valleys originating from the Karam Middle Ramu area, which was one of the major population centers on the shores of the Inland Sea. The marsupial or bird figures from the two zones fall into two groups. Those from the lower Lake Gap, the Nati area to the north, and the Terry and Mendy areas to the south, lack lower limbs and often have a raised band in the area of the abdomen. A raised band is also used as a form of decoration on borders in the Terry area. By contrast, legs are represented on full body carvings on the figures from the upper Lay River Valley and the Marimuni rivers. As well as legs, two head styles are also present, and one has a longer snout with elaborate nostrils, whereas the other has a shorter snout with little or no nostril depiction. All the figures with specific provenience come from high altitude areas. The two figures without specific provenience were obtained during road construction and bought on the Bayeux River roadside. One of the figures was elaborate nostril depiction from Amboom, was dated using micro rootlets found in the micro crack. During conservation work, these rootlets provided the material for a radiocarbon date of about 3500 BP. The distribution of the Western Figures group is along the important north-south trade axis that extended from the Sapek watershed south to the Terry Basin. One figure and a related pestle are from the eastern trade axis, or southern foothills intermediary zone, running from Terry to the Mendai area. Zoomorphic and anthropomorphic figures with some resemblance to the Engen finds have been found in the lower Sapek, middle, and upper Ramu, Gumine in Simbu, and near the Girua River on the slopes of Mount Lamington in Oro province. Despite the geographic spread of these figures, the unusual stylistic features indicate that these resemblances are based on a common iconography. The specific feature is the presence of a ridge that joins the shoulders on the back of many figures, and it is found, for example, on the Amboom figure from Enga, and features on the figures from Gumin and Simbu and Girua in Oro province. Now, taking a look at the bird pestles, the only representations of identifiable species in the Central Highlands are of the Cassowary and Hornbill birds. These bird figures come from the Sapek Terry zone, just as figures lack legs in the lower Lay Gap. Bird pestles from the Terry Sepik zone lack wings. Bird pestles with wings are present in the Lay Valley system, mainly in the middle Lay, and are a diagnostic marker of the Sapik Ramu Wagi zone. Finds from Yawl in the Keronk Valley, the area between the Lay and Bayeux rivers, the Lay Valley up to the Wabag, and the many finds in the Western Highlands and Simbu show a clear orientation to the Sapek Ramu. The finds from the Mendai area is the only find of a winged bird pestle from the Southern Highlands in the database. It was found along the important north-south trade alignment through the southern foothills intermediary zone mentioned above, and may have been trafficked in there by Europeans taking souvenirs as they conducted their drug trafficking business. Bird pestles are found from Tokane on the Madang coast and from Marienberg in the lower Sapek, where a white sand beach existed in the mid-Holocene. Others occur in the Willamette Peninsula in New Britain, Icora in Oro, and Wonia in Western Province. Thus we see a wide coastal distribution of the bird imagery and ritual. Now, on the bossed borders. So for those of you who don't know, the raising of a stud or other portion of a ceramic piece to form decorative or functional patterns is called a boss, and the technique referred to as bossing. Now, bossed borders with rounded bases are common in the Sapek Ramu Wagi zone, but curiously are absent from the Sapek Terry zone. Borders with rounded bases and bosses are only found in eastern New Guinea and in West New Britain. Within eastern New Guinea, they occur in parts of Enga, Western Highlands, parts of the Southern Highlands, Simbu, and the Eastern Highlands, and also in the Schrader Range of Madang. They are found in the coastal Oro province of the PNG, and in the Oro Central Province highlands, the upper Watut river systems of the Morobe province of the PNG. And they are found in New Britain, east as far as Wallamet's Peninsula. They appear to be absent from East New Britain, New Ireland, Manus, Bougainville, Soudan, Milne Bay, and Gulf provinces, as well as West Papua. Now we're getting to some of the names which will be familiar to those of you who are old enough to remember the war at Guadalcanal. Now, pedestal mortars. Stone mortars are infrequent from the Sepik Terry zone compared to the very frequent occurrence of them in the Lay River Valley. Only one plain pedestal mortar comes from the lower Lay Gap River and its tributaries, whereas 24 plain and decorated pedestal forms come from the Lay River and its tributaries. In the Sepik Ramu Wagi sphere, pedestal mortars are commonly decorated with an encircling ring of bosses, in much the same way as the simple bowl mortars. There are only two elaborately decorated pedestal mortars from the Terry area. One of these is decorated in an alternative way, so that the result resembles a ring of bosses. This was done by the use of an undulating raised band. Pedestal mortars with bosses are found in the main Lay Valley, and examples occur in the Sepik. They are found in most cases in the eastern parts of the southern highlands, the western highlands, the Schrader Range in Madang, Simbu, and mainly in the southwestern part of the eastern highlands. They are characterized by an encircling row of bosses on the upper body above the waist. The base is usually flared wider than the waist, and outside of the Sepik Ramu Wagi sphere, plain pedestal mortars are only known from the Oro Central Province Highlands, as the Sepik finds are the only pedestal mortars decorated with a ring of bosses above the waist from a lowland or coastal area. It is likely that this style is a highland innovation. Now, the ATC unifying religion emerges, and when it does, mortars decorated with anthropomorphic faces are not common in eastern New Guinea. Other finds from diverse regions share stylistic features achieved in Tecopa, in the Paia Ela area on the lower Legap River, in an unconventional way. The Tecopa mortar has the usual long nose, with the upper part extended to make an encircling frame for the face. However, instead of raised bosses extending around the circumference of the bowl from behind the upper face, it has a row of depressions. In other words, reverse bosses. It has cheek dimples like finds from elsewhere, but as with the bosses, the Tecopa dimples are depressed rather than raised, and the mouth is clearly defined. No other anthropomorphic face mortar with depressed bosses and dimples is known. In this respect, the Tecopa mortar, like the Hornbill and the Cassowary bird pestles from the same area, are unconventional and represent a local shaman or priestly specialization. There is a heavily weathered anthropomorphic mortar from Lama Lama in the Compiam area in eastern Anga that is a version of the Tecopa find and may represent the spread of an ATC religious doctrine. I suspect that the face mortar from Margarima, which is located about midway between Terry and Mendai in the southern foothills intermediary zone, that has more features in common with the Tecopa mortar and finds from outside the highlands, is further proof of that ATC doctrinal spread. In much the same way as we see, for example, in Mesoamerica, the Olmec heads spread from an originating center from Villahermosa to Veracruz, and then take on local stylistic variations, but the essential ATC religious doctrine is represented by the head, and it's retained more or less intact. Both the Tecopa and Margarima mortars are very similar to the most elaborate anthropomorphic face mortar known from the PNG. This ATC diagnostic religious stone figure was found at Vrimsibu in the middle Ramu River in Madang province. Another mortar with the same ATC stylistic features is known from the upper Watut in Morobe province. A coastal spread of this religion was its first phase. Mortars have pezels, so the discovery of temporally related pezels is another indicator of the spread of this unifying religion where they occur. Now, like anthropomorphic face mortars, pezels decorated with anthropomorphic features are not common and mainly occur in two areas of eastern New Guinea. These are the Central Highlands and the Huon Peninsula. The most elaborately decorated pestle with an anthropomorphic head, known from the PNG, was found at Cape Arcona on the Huon Peninsula. Another with similar features, namely inset eyes, long nose with inset nostrils, mouth, jutting chin, and clearly defined ears, was found at Sialum on the Huon Peninsula. All have sunken eyes except the raised eyes on the heads from Terry and Yaramanda. Two Lay River Valley pezels come from Pombo Posa in the Sepik Ramu Wagi zone and are comparable to those found on the Huon Peninsula, as are a number of related examples from the highlands. And another pestle comes from Lake Kopiago in the Sepik Terry zone. What may be related finds are known from Terry in the southern highlands, Repikama and Yaramanda, both located in the area between the Lay and Bayer rivers, and the Kundiawa area in Simbu. Two other possibly related finds come from the eastern highlands and the Irawat Surprise Creek junction of the Upper Watut and Morobe province. Now, there is trochus jewelry. Trochus is a genus of a medium-sized to large top-shaped sea snail. That is a marine gastropod mollusk of the Trochidae family with an operculum and a pearly inside. Prehistorically, the sea snail species most often used in jewelry and is no longer technically a Trochus family member, but a Tegulidae family member called Tectus niloticus because of its good mother-of-pearl layer, which was traditionally made into items such as pearl buttons and jewelry. In view of the links with the Huon Peninsula, it is interesting that Trochus armbands have been excavated from deposits dated to 5,500 BP at the Kutepa rock shelter near Tipinini in the lower Legab Valley. Today, Trochus is not a common shellfish on the Sepik or the coast, but is common on the rocky shores of the Huon Peninsula and offshore islands. Now, the Trans-New Guinea language family. Polly has proposed that the widespread distribution of the Trans-New Guinea language family be linked to the spread of agriculture. An antiquity of 7,000 to 12,000 years is proposed for this language family. Lexico-statistical diversity is greater therein than in either the Indo-European or Austronesian language families. The languages in the Trans-New Guinea family are spoken in all the inhabited highland valleys, that is, from the neck of the Bird's Head to southeast Papua, much of the southern lowlands of West Papua, as well as in the lowland and mountainous areas to the northeast and south of New Guinea. The largest and most diverse subgroups within this family occur in the lowland and mountainous areas to the northeast of New Guinea, and there are about 100 languages in the Medang group and about 70 in the adjacent Finisterre-Huon group. After Medang and the Finisterre-Huon subgroups, the greater diversity is found in the highland valleys between the Strickland River and the eastern highlands provinces. Now, Polly proposes that the timing of early agriculture at the archaeological Cook swamp site in the western highlands that we talked about last time, and the spread of the agricultural communities from this area happened 10,000 to 7,000 years ago. This does provide the best explanation as to how this language family came to be so widely distributed in New Guinea. Therefore, when the highest densities of mortar and pestle finds occur where the greatest lexicostatistical diversity within the Trans-New Guinea language family occurs, we should hypothesize that the simple chiefdoms had reached an internal contradiction that required a unifying solution. In the absence of the state, that is, the army and the police. This is always religion. That is the key diagnostic for proving the emergence of the stage of advanced theocratic chiefdoms. This artifactual and lexicostatistical evidence occurs in tandem in Madang, Morobe, and the Central Highlands. That is, the low frequency of finds where related languages are found in West Papua suggests that some factor other than language led to the observed distribution of these artifacts. Mortars and pestles do not have a uniform distribution in New Guinea. Very few have been found in West Papua and the south coast of Papua New Guinea. Most are found in the highlands valleys located in the spine of New Guinea, extending from the southern highlands as far east as Oro and Central provinces, and in the coastal lowlands of the former Sepik Ramu Inland Sea, and east to the islands of New Britain and New Ireland. A few are found west of the Sepik coast. Most are from eastern New Guinea, New Britain, and New Ireland. Commonality in elaborate styles is higher within eastern New Guinea. Mainland style influences extend east to the Willamette Peninsula of West New Britain, but are not apparently beyond the Willamette Peninsula of West New Britain. Thus, linkage between eastern New Guinea and New Ireland was indirect through New Britain. Ocean-going technology and sociocultural causality. Links between the mainland and New Britain demonstrate some maritime prowess. The voyage across the difficult waters of the Vitiaz Strait between the Huon Peninsula and West New Britain is the proof of this technological ability. The spread of chiefdom solutions as a sociocultural necessity was the engine driving the decision to go to the dangerous waters in search of new lands. Now, disregarding localized variation in stone figure sculpturing, we see a shared iconography in the styles of mortars, pestles, and figures, that is, figurines or statues, in the Sepik Ramu Wagi zone. Now, that zone also has the densest distribution of mortars and pestles. That iconographic duplication is proof that a unifying religion evolved as part and parcel of the stage of advanced theocratic chiefdoms. For 10,000 years, the Wagi has been the center of agricultural innovation and development. The Wagi and its associated valleys were the most densely settled part of the highlands after 5500 BP, and by that time, the ATC stage was well established in the Sepik Ramu Wagi zone. Ideas and trade moved together through the multiple routes that linked the inhabitants of the Wagi and its associated valleys with the people living on the shores of the inland sea. Canoes were carrying people with links to distant areas, and among them the Huon Peninsula and West New Britain. The third independent line of evidence comes in the form of Obsidian Tools. Some of the proposed mid-Holocene iconographic links are independently verified by the presence of another artifact made in the mid-Holocene, moving in the opposite direction. The mid-Holocene introduction of bird pestles and bossed bowl mortars from East New Guinea into the west of New Britain seems more plausible when it is known that obsidian stem tools made in the mid-Holocene on the Willamette Peninsula of West New Britain come from local sources have been found on the shore and islands of the Sepik Ramu Inland Sea. The production of obsidian stem tools on the Willamette Peninsula dates from between 6,000 and 3,600 years ago. 4 obsidian stem tools come from the Sepik, and 3 have been sourced to the Kutao Bao source on West New Britain. 2 of the stem tools come from Mangum on the large mid-Holocene island at the mouth of the inland sea. A third comes from the Bien River area. The Bien drains from the western side of the same mid-Holocene island, and the fourth find is from Sepik. Now, in conclusion, the spread of the socio-cultural stage of advanced theocratic chiefdoms throughout New Guinea is the best explanation for the widespread distribution of elaborate types of mortars, pestles, and figures in eastern New Guinea and east to west New Britain. It has been recognized for some time that mortars and pestles occur in both New Guinea and the Bismarck Archipelago, but only this ATC model explains this distribution. We know that the broad-spectrum wild resource exploitation of the advanced Paleolithic in the Pacific led to the cultivation and horticulture during the Pleistocene. That technology and social organization advanced to true agriculture by the early Holocene and was widespread in New Guinea and the Bismarck Archipelago in the middle Holocene. Archaeological evidence for agriculture in the lowlands and the islands includes the appearances of nucleated settlements in a landscape characterized by decreasing forest cover and higher rates of erosion. We have reviewed 3 lines of evidence proving how and when the ATC stage evolved in Melanesia. The preliminary dating of the rectilinear earth mounds at Lavongai on New Hanover, New Ireland, from 4000 to 3000 BP proves agriculture was pre-Lapita. Stone mortars and pestles provide another line of proof. The presence of stylistically similar mortars and pestles, bird pestles and bossed bowl mortars in the highlands, on the coast of the Sepik-Ramu Inland Sea, and in West New Britain indicate that ideas and products, including taro, were being exchanged by the social networks that linked these regions. Moreover, the presence of stemmed obsidian artifacts in the Sepik-Ramu, which were imported from the Willamette Peninsula in West New Britain, where they were made in the mid-Holocene, demonstrates that maritime links existed between these areas at this time. In Papua New Guinea, the archaeological record reveals that the terminal Pleistocene and the early to middle Holocene witnessed rapid cultural evolution. This was the case in New Guinea Islands, lowlands, and islands. Inga and other parts of the highlands of Papua New Guinea were part of the social interaction sphere that linked the coast, other parts of New Guinea, and the Bismarck Archipelago in the middle Holocene. During this time, and even during the existence of a large inland sea, placed the large intermontane valleys of the highlands closer to the coast. Stylistically similar stone mortars and pestles in the highlands prove ATC religion was present in the Sepik-Ramu, the Baydang-Morobe coastline, and on West New Britain. The spread of that religion, shown by the mortar and pestle distribution, was accompanied by specialist produced commodities and by the taro crops. Taro production before 5500 BP occurs in the highlands, from where we now have taro starch dating to the early Holocene, and in the lowlands and the Bismarck Archipelago. And that brings us to a conclusion of our study of the Melanesian chiefdoms on New Guinea Island. And from here we're going to move south into the Solomon Islands in the next lecture.